All right, y'all, I'm back. So, what was it? In July, fuck it, let me just read my notes. July 24th, I happened to be away on a work trip when I noticed that my cameras had notified me that somebody had entered into my apartment. And it was by way of motion detection, right? Now, me and spirits like this, don't forget I am an open channel and I'm a medium. When something happens in my phone, they'll tell me if it's them, or they'll tell me if it's an actual living human being who has crossed my threshold into my apartment. Now, this happened on Thursday, July 24th at 6:10 p.m. Spirit told me that I asked Spirit, was it one of them? That was because they like to do, whatever. They like to have fun, meaning flicker the lights, move stuff. Basically, let me let me know that they're here, okay, and that I'm not alone. But Spirit had informed me that there were two people who came to my apartment. I said, well, why did they come into my apartment? And I was formed to take something. Okay. And I said, take what? So they shared with me what was taken. I was like, why would they take that? And then I was told for spell work. Okay. Death magic, more specifically. Death magic, blood magic, more specifically. Okay. So I said, who came into my apartment? They told me one black man and one Asian woman. So I said, was it Mariah? Because she's came in here before. They said, no, it was her sister. I said, oh, all right. So they came into my apartment to take things, to do spell work on me, y'all. Death magic. I lost count. I've lost count at this point. How many death spells have been done on me to take me out, y'all? I've lost count. I said, who's the other person? They told me maintenance. I said, who? They told me the supervisor. Okay. Now, it just so happens that Craig was only here for a year. I think he got a little nervous because he probably felt like people were like slowly at his heels. And when I say people, I mean me. As far as figuring out specifically what his role was, what he was doing here, because him being maintenance was just a front. I mean, he's in fraud. Okay. When Spirit showed me the shit that he does, I said, whoa. Okay. Spirit also shared me the person, Craig, who left out. Tag team the person coming in, which is the new supervisor. Okay. New supervisor goes by Marcus. That is not his government name. And the person that told on him was his homeboy, the young YN. I said, he was the person that told me. The one that passed away. He said he part of my set. I said, what set? Yo, I had to look that shit up. Don't judge me. Don't judge me. I had to look that set up. It was like part of your game. That's how people talk, part of his game. I said, oh, all right. So anyways, I remember having a conversation because it was like a long time ago. Not so much long. I think it was 2023. When Spirit had informed me, you need to change your locks. People are coming in here in your apartment. And so I remember vividly having a conversation with the leasing office. And I sat there and I said, I changed the locks. I remember sitting there and I said, I changed the locks because I was concerned about security and safety, more specifically my welfare. Okay. I had shared other experiences at that time that I observed, right? And she told me, oh, well, don't be concerned. We don't give out keys. I've never given out my keys. I only have 2 keys. My keys stay on my keychain. She said the only people who have keys is maintenance in the leasing office. And I said, okay. She said, so you don't have to be concerned about anybody entering your apartment. That's what she told me. Did she believe that at the time? Yes. Okay. But I knew different. At that time, I knew that Spirit had informed me people were coming into my apartment, but I really wasn't sure as far as like who it was. Okay. Until they eventually told me who it was, y'all. But that's what they informed me, was that the copies that were used to enter my apartment building weren't my specific copies of my keys, but were keys that, what do you say, that you can open up any door. Where would you get those keys? Leasing office, maintenance. Okay. So then I told Spirit, tell me more. I said, I'm like, shit, since you telling people's business here. And when I say Spirit, you know, when I'm speaking to specifically in this case, would be my spiritual team. But not only that, would be friends and family of the people who wronged me and or wronging me. Kind of like the ones who hold integrity and honor. Were like, I know that's my people's, but I don't want to have nothing to do with that, because you also have to understand, even though, you know, even though we're navigating and migrating this physical world, right? When your family passes on, they have their own job to do. And a lot of times it is to push the bloodline forward by eradicating karma. And when I say eradicating karma, simply balancing it. So when you have somebody that's part of the bloodline doing fuckery and fakery and foolery to fuck up all the good that somebody may have done for the family, for the bloodline, for the ancestral line, to fuck to fuck up what they got going on, because it's just like we move as one. That's how families move, good and bad. We move as one. So they were like, we don't want nothing to do with them. This is what they did. 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 This is what they're planning to do. Watch out for this. This is what they're going to do on Tuesday at this certain time. This is how many people are involved. Like, they get that specific, y'all. And I just keep my mouth shut. With the exception of this video. Okay? And that's just them trying to make good for the fuckery that they people doing on the earthly and physical plane. Because it's like, when they fuck up, they gotta suffer. Your kids gotta suffer based on whatever karma that you've done. It all has to be balanced. Okay. So I was like, Spirit, are they creating fake work orders to allow themselves in? And I'm like, nah, that can't be, because I'm just like, I would be notified, right? And I was like, they just walk on in. You know, because when they walk on in, people don't question them because they're maintenance, right? So then I said specifically, who gave the keys? I said, Spirit also informed me that Steve, Craig, Kevin, whatever the fuck he goes by these days, was the one responsible for handing out two keys, whether it was to one of the neighbors and one to Mariah's crazy ass. He was the one that gave out two keys. Okay? Anyways, let me continue. We're at 11 minutes. So in addition to, the fuckery and the fakery and the foolishness, I know that I say that, but I love that alliteration. It's just the way it rolls off your tongue, at least to me. So then on top of them doing all this nonsensical bullshit, little did I know that they were doing all this bullshit prior to getting positions where I live at. And it was just an opportunity for them to be closer, stay closer, keep eyes on me, right? Gain interest into my apartment for a multitude of variety of reasons. So then I was just like, what's his name? Marcus, the one who's currently a supervisor. But first, let me address this. So I asked Spirit, are all of the maintenance men guilty? And they said every single one of the individuals who is part of the maintenance team has done something. Okay? Something. Contributed something. I mean, it could be as little as keeping an eye on me, watching me, keeping an eye on me, following me to wherever I go. And I don't know if it's the same for anybody else, but me being an empath, and as sensitive as I am, it's like I have to prepare myself when I go out, because I can hear people's thoughts. It just becomes a lot. It just becomes a lot. So I just have to mentally prepare myself. And not only so much as that, when you're a medium and not people, but the non-living, those who transition, can see you, that you see them, it's just like a floodgate. They come in saying, can you please give my family this, family member messages this, and sometimes sometimes it can be a bit much. So I usually opt, staying in. I'm a hermit. I'm a homebody, y'all. At least since the pandemic. So that's one of the reasons why I don't really go out that much, because it can be very sensory overload. I'll say that. I don't know if any other mediums, may have that, may experience that. But I know that's the case for me, y'all. But anyways, I have, you know. So anyways, let me keep on moving, y'all. So Spirit was telling me anywhere from the small infractions, keep an eye on me, spying, stalking, me following me, you know, wherever, those small things, to literally breaking and entering into my apartment because they weren't given permission to do it, taking certain things, okay, and and in some extreme cases trying to poison me. I said, what the fuck? They said, yeah, putting stuff in my food, okay, water supply, food, what else, Spirit? Through the vents. I said, who did that? I said, was it Craig and Steve? Kevin? They're like, nah. Boy, Marcus. I was like, whoa. I said, okay. Is this what we doing? There was one time where I was having an issue with my tub. And I specifically had somebody put in an order because there was, what was it? The drain was slow. So they came in. I happened to be on a work call meeting. They came in, they did what they needed to do. And then they left one of the screws loose. I said, Spirit, why would they do that? Now, mind you, I was preoccupied because I was in a work meeting. But then after maintenance left, more specifically after Marcus left, I said, Spirit, tell me what he did. And they told me that he fixed what needed to be fixed, but he had removed a screw. He didn't replace it. I wouldn't have noticed it had he replaced it. But they told me that he had removed a screw. I said, okay, that's nothing. They're like, it was a camera. So a camera in my bathtub, y'all. Told me he removed that screw, removed the camera. So apparently this is what they doing here. I was told that I'm not the only one that they like to use listening devices and cameras on. And that's why I said, word? They're like, yeah. And they were like, that's why a conversation was had with the now new property manager. I said, when was that conversation had? They told me March of 2021. I said, what type of conversation? About the Gangstalking campaign, y'all. So that's how it started, with a conversation. All they had to do was flash some money in this motherfucker's face. Okay? And he didn't give a fuck about my welfare. Meanwhile, and at this point, I'm not even talking about Marcus. I'm talking about his boss. Meanwhile, the whole time, he is grinning and smiling in front of my motherfucking face. Is there anything I can do for you? Are you okay? And he's accepting money to make my life a living fucking hell. He's receiving money in exchange for this whole apartment complex to include gang stalkers on me, covens on me, members of the maintenance team gaining access to me, having access to me, putting shit in my house, leaving shit, taking shit out my house, trying to take me out by way of poisoning through my food, okay, through gas. He's accepting money for this. There was one point I overheard a conversation. I ain't flinch. I just act, regular. Between him and a supervisor, the supervisor. I was like, why the fuck would they have a conversation like that? But I just played it cool. And then it all makes sense. It all makes sense. Okay? It all makes sense. It all makes sense why even the police officer, the very first police officer, was part of the Gangstalking campaign, who happened to live on the property at the time. Right? It all makes sense, being paid. I said, damn, was it just bribery or reward? What was it? Spirit told me it was that and blackmail. So it's almost like he was voluntold with the bag. I said, well, why the fuck would they blackmail him? I said, share this with me because I want the tea. What's the tea? Apparently, as much as they were researching me, they were researching him. To see where his fuck-ups are, his weaknesses are, so that they can know how to approach him with a check. Here, do this for us or else. But it wasn't quite said like that, right? And it was delivered by a very attractive woman. So it softened the blow up, right? I said, Spirit, I don't need to know about his personal business like that. I don't give a fuck about his personal business. But just tell me a little bit. What the fuck would they have over him to kind of force his hand into a contract? Money, right? But what is it? And they said a history. I said, what's the history? A history of taking photos, a history of engaging in inappropriate activities with tenants, a history of taking videos of tenants unbeknownst to them. So we got pictures, we got video footage in bedrooms and bathrooms unbeknownst to the people who live there. They were like, yeah, that's it. So it made it easy for Sierra, the head of the family crew, to come in to present a bag because they knew what his weakness was, but then they also knew what his fuck-ups were. So then here we have it, a gang-stalking campaign centered around me. I said, Spirit, was I the first person? And they said, to this degree, yes, but I'm not the first person that has been filmed in or taking pictures unbeknownst to me within the property. Apartment complex, right? So I said, okay. I knew something was up when I saw him and Craig going to certain neighbors with a technician, one to talk to the neighbors and then go into their apartment. When me being there, I think at that point was a year, and I had never seen or rarely saw maintenance. Because one thing I'll give to Hispanics is they tend to be, or the men at least, they are very handy. They are good with their hands, y'all. So it made sense that they didn't really call maintenance much for anything. So then my ears perked up when all of a sudden I kept on hearing maintenance. Sometimes they wouldn't say anything because they knew I peep game. So they would just knock. I said, well, damn, they didn't came up here 2 or 3 times this week already. What do they need fixed? So then back to my story, I said, are all the maintenance men involved? They said all of them has done one thing or another to come against you in some way, with the exception of one, and that's the old man. I don't know if he's still here. Okay. I was informed that maintenance has entered my apartment more than 25 times, that were 25 plus times, okay? Because anytime my shit goes awry, I'm like, yo, spirit, which one of y'all is fucking with my shit? And they're like, yo, that's not us. And then they'll tell me who. There was one point where all three baby mamas came up into my shit. I said, how the fuck can all three baby mamas come into my shit? One lives in Delaware, one lives in New York. Okay. And you know, Mariah had moved here in January of 2025. Okay. So anyways, I think I'll stop there. My whole intention purposes for doing this again is to educate, inform, and empower. Y'all, I've been through a lot. It don't make no damn sense. Since 2020, it don't make no damn sense. But nevertheless, I'm going to go ahead and stop here. Spirit did tell me I need to transition and focus on other things. So I will do that. However, my last video will be a wrap-up video of my final thoughts and what I've learned throughout this experience in counting, because they're still, gang stalking me. Spirit tells me that it will come to an end soon. And did show me the outcome of a lot of these folks who were involved. And they span from a multitude, okay? And one thing is, don't think you getting out just because you choose to take yourself out, because that's not an escape or exit either. Especially when I got more people on the other side than here supporting me. And they will ensure justice is served and the scales will be balanced, y'all. Whether or not people choose to take themselves out or not. So with that, I'm out. Peace.